Hello, and welcome back to the second session of the Start Your Term with GC Students two-day event. My name is Priyanka Sharma. I was in the previous session, so welcome back to those of you who were in Be a Star. My pronouns are she, her, and I am joining you today from the National Capital Region, which is the traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation. I encourage you in turn to think about the presence of the Indigenous peoples, past and present, who call these lands home. I am a senior HR advisor at Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada. I am also the co-chair for GC Students, so I'll be presenting here today with Josh from the Federal Youth Network. The GC Students Network is a collaboration with the Federal Youth Network. We're proud to welcome you to this session, which will teach you about leveraging.
Oh, sorry, Priyanka.
Sorry, I got muted there for a second. So I don't know where it cut off, but I'll just say that the GC Students Network, in collaboration with the Federal Youth Network, is proud to welcome you to this session, which will teach you about leveraging social media as a worker in the federal public service and to help you build your career. This session is delivered in English, so the French presentation is being delivered simultaneously. If you'd like to join the French session, please follow the Zoom link in your invitation. We'll go to the next slide. Thank you very much. Okay, so today's objectives are to learn the best practices for using social media to build your career in the federal public service. We're going to help you understand the values and ethics guiding public service workers' social media use, balance political activities and the duties of public service workers, as well as craft effective social media posts to attract potential employers. So I'm going to pass it over to Josh to give a brief introduction of himself, as well as continue on with the content. Over to you, Josh.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks very much, Priyanka. So yeah, I'm Joshua Frame. I'm based in the National Capital Region as well. I'm the National Chair for the Federal Youth Network, and I've spent about half my career in the regions. So I was based out of the Greater Toronto area for about 7 years, and half of my career in the National Capital Region. I think the value of social media is incredibly high. So we'll go through some important points in terms of today's content. But I think especially as we are in a bit of a more challenging time in terms of finding positions, whether that's a student position or whether that's a bridging opportunity, then building your network and using social media to find opportunities can be more key than ever. Okay, so with that, so we'll start off around the value of social media. So we are talking in the context of many different platforms, and I will say that the platforms that we in the past have sort of highlighted have changed over time. So we had lots of public servants using Twitter in previous times, now called X. That's not really the case today. We've seen a lot of a large migration over to using LinkedIn more actively, and we'll talk through a bit in terms of the platforms that you can use. But really, as far as having your profile up there, it displays your skills, it displays your experience, and using a professional network. So whether that's LinkedIn or whether that's another platform, it can be like your online resume. And what we've heard from some facilitators across Canada is that they spend a lot more time on their LinkedIn profile. They don't spend a lot of time updating a Word version of their resume and sending that. When people express interest in hiring them, they slip them their link to their LinkedIn profile because that's their sort of tailored and curated content. And depending on how you're setting that up, that can highlight your background, your areas of expertise, your career achievements. It can lead to job opportunities, collaborations, professional recognition. And I will say, I have over 3,000 connections on LinkedIn, followers or connections, I guess. And people reach out to me there where they would not be reaching out to me otherwise. They would not be able necessarily to find my exact contact info to email me at my GC email address, but they're able to contact me on LinkedIn in kind of a more informal way and ask questions that might just need a one sentence response or might be a request for a conversation. So definitely a different way to approach people. And that goes to speak to the networking portion. So it really, in terms of networking, that involves building and nurturing those professional connections, those relationships. And you can use social media to connect with other colleagues, with industry leaders, with professionals in your field. You can exchange knowledge or seek advice or explore other opportunities. As an example, I follow Simon Sinek, who's a sort of business professional. He's written some books called Start With Why, and workshops around finding your purpose, sort of in terms of the work that you do. I connected with him on LinkedIn. I don't necessarily email him because I don't know, he has probably 25 million followers or something on there. But I like to see the kind of information that he can share, how it can affect my team, how I manage, how I see things in terms of that government or candidate context. But networking is really essential for career growth. So it can help you stay informed about industry trends, gain insights from those experienced professionals, potentially find mentors. I've had a good number of folks, approach me for conversations off of LinkedIn to say, hey, I see that you run the Federal Youth Network. Can I have half an hour of your time? I set up those conversations on a Friday. And can have those kind of like informational sessions, whether it's mentoring or coaching or just giving a little bit of advice, and really that network, it can help sustain you. It can help start your career, but it can help sustain your career. And you want to find relevant expertise to break those silos across the GC. Personally, I can say, I've used LinkedIn and social media to kind of figure out what's going on in terms of like when I'm working on a project. How can I, learn from what other people have done rather than starting fresh? And certainly, in large organizations and communities, it's challenging to find that right person with the expertise that you need. So looking for them on the government directory service might not lead to any sort of response, or emailing someone randomly with questions. Their first question might be like, kind of, why are you emailing? But by building that professional network, so you can identify those individuals, have those kind of like one-off conversations, potentially have those sort of easier questions that you send over LinkedIn or other social media platforms. So that can help you sort of foster that collaboration, improve efficiency. I will say just be wary of, don't do this necessarily in an official work context, of sharing confidential information over LinkedIn. Obviously not a good idea. But forming those relationships can help you kind of down the line, especially if you're starting your career, and facilitate that communication and collaboration, and lead to more innovative and cohesive outcomes. So definitely think about other reasons that you may be using social media in the GC. For me, it's been a connector. It has helped me figure out, what other people are working on. It's helped to figure out, approaches in terms of that, in terms of projects that we're working on, in terms of like potential people to collaborate with, identify speakers for conferences, all sorts of things, all sorts of positive things can come from the use of social media in a GC context. Next slide, please. Okay, so that was the good part, and I guess now we get to the more challenging part. So in terms of using social media, so what are some of the pitfalls of using social media? So first off, we have, if you're not respecting values and ethics. So every organization, every profession has sorry, and if you can just make sure that you're on mute for any new folks who have joined. But every profession has a set of values and ethics. We are no different in the public service. We have a very clear set of values and ethics and standards that guide our behavior and our decision making. We are a non-partisan public service. We serve the government of the day, and we do not take a personal stake in that decision making. We provide the best advice that we can, and it's up to the government of the day to determine what they want to do with that advice and determine what platform they've been elected on, what programs they've been elected to. So when using social media, it's important to adhere to those principles. It's important to maintain confidentiality, to respect colleagues, clients, to avoid conflicts of interest. So failing to respect those values and ethics can damage your reputation. It can harm your employer. It can lead to disciplinary actions. So you can be very passionate about a cause, but when you're identifying yourself as a GC employee, or even if you're not, you can be held to account on what you say on social media and how you say it. I give the example of when I was a manager at Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada. My role was not to criticize the organization and criticize a program that we were doing. My role was to share that advice share my best advice in terms of how we could improve a program, to work with the rest of the management team to figure that out, but never to do that in a way that would sort of talk about that publicly, because that was not my role. And that is not going to be your role unless you are working in external communications, in which case you are sharing the department's approved communication plans through social media. Unprofessional behaviors on social media, so that can include posting inappropriate content, engaging in heated arguments, using offensive language, or sharing overly personal details. So that can reflect poorly on you and your organization. It can undermine your credibility and your professionalism. So if you're working for Environment and Climate Change Canada and posting on X or on LinkedIn how you don't agree with the policy about X, the policy about that you're supposed to be working on to implement, that reflects poorly on you. It shows a lack of impartiality in terms of how you are implementing that, because that is your job. And that is our job, to implement the government policy. So that can undermine the credibility of the department. It can undermine the credibility of the government of Canada. So it's important to maintain that level of decorum, to think about how your online actions might be perceived by others in your professional network. And to, again, maintain that impartiality. In terms of a breach of a duty of loyalty, so I touched on this a little bit earlier, but we have a duty to our employer. That is not unique to the government of Canada. I couldn't go work for Google or Microsoft and post, Microsoft is such a gong show, or Google is, not a great organization to work for. I don't know why I work here. I would expect that in a scenario like that, I would have a very short career at either of those organizations. And that's the same with any employer. You are paid and compensated by that employer to do work on their behalf. And you have a duty of loyalty to that employer. In this case, your employer is the government of Canada, which means that you have to act in the best interest of the organization. So on social media, that can be compromised by criticizing your employer, by sharing confidential information, or promoting competitors. We don't have necessarily competitors in terms of the government of Canada, but in terms of, generally, we want to make sure that we are acting judiciously in terms of how we manage our social media usage. So breaching that duty can result in disciplinary actions, up to termination, and harm the trust between you and your employer. In terms of character integrity, so that involves being honest, being fair, being consistent in your actions and decisions. So on social media, your posts and interactions should reflect those qualities. Misrepresenting yourself, spreading misinformation, or engaging in deceitful practices can damage your personal integrity and your professional reputation. So it's really important to ensure that that online presence aligns with the ethical standards expected in your professional life. And this really applies to all social media platforms, not simply like LinkedIn and Twitter. This applies to your lockdown Facebook account. And certainly throughout your career, you're going to see examples of why this is important. I won't bring up any of those examples because we are recording the session, but certainly in my professional career, I've seen examples of folks, even with a secure Facebook account, and they share something and it does not land the way they expected it to land, and it leads to challenges in terms of their career and leads to issues for them down the line. So be very conscious of that. All right, and then the failure to maintain political impartiality. So as I mentioned, we are an impartial public service. You were not hired to bring your particular political views to your role in the government. We are here to serve that government of the day. Whatever party may be in power, we are served to deliver on the policies and the programs that they have been elected, that they have gone to Canadians and said, this is the platform that I would like to bring forward for the future of Canada. And then we are here to implement that program, that policy, and make the changes that Canadians have told us that they want. So it's very important to make sure that you are on the right side of that. So if you express partisan opinions on social media, even if that's on your Facebook account that's locked down, and I know we're speaking to students, so it's probably more Instagram or other platforms that people are using. But just be very conscious of that. You were not hired for your political beliefs, and you are not to express those political beliefs in a partisan manner, because it can undermine your role with them. All right, Priyanka, back to you.
Thank you. I think it's great points that you shared, Josh, in terms of the advantages and also the pieces that we should be taking into consideration to make sure we're using social media appropriately, professionally, and safely. Given how powerful social media is as a tool, we have a question for you all, and a poll is going to pop up on your screen. And the question is, what social media platforms are the most useful for the federal public servants? So I'll just take a second here to allow you all to answer this question. And I believe that the options are Facebook, LinkedIn, X, also used to be known as Twitter, Reddit, Instagram, TikTok, and Snapchat. When I saw Snapchat on there, I laughed a little. Yes, so sorry, I should mention, consider 1 as the most useful and 7 as the least useful. So 1 is the most useful and 7 is the least useful. So I'm gonna go over here. Interesting to see. So I can speak on, as a public servant, I can speak on the social media platforms that I use. And that is mostly going to be LinkedIn as my #1 and probably Facebook as my #2, given that we have so many informal Facebook groups for the government of Canada. And I think that those are great tools to be using to make those networking connections. And if you attended yesterday's session, we really talked about that important piece of networking. And so we discussed LinkedIn a little bit and Facebook groups as well. So that's great to see that a lot of you have put LinkedIn as #1 and kind of we go further down there, and Snapchat's probably not a good social media tool to be using as a public servant for professional uses. And again, it's just about being extremely careful and mindful of how you're utilizing these tools, because they are extremely powerful tools. And don't forget that as an employer, we can see your social media, so you have to be extremely careful with what you're putting there. So thank you so much for taking part in this poll. I will pass it over to Josh to talk a little bit more about duty of loyalty and what that means.
Absolutely. All right. So a few key things to think of when we think of the duty of loyalty. So as I mentioned, this isn't unique to the GC, but with the GC, we are a huge organization, and in whatever role you are in as a student, you have an opportunity to show that you understand this duty of loyalty, but you can quickly get on the wrong side of action if you do not sort of understand it. So as an employee or a student worker in the government of Canada, you should not be doing the following. So don't link protected or confidential information. There are examples of this from the past. I won't bring those up, but if you were to search for news stories, these often end up in protected or confidential information. And that goes beyond being dismissed at times. There are folks who face criminal action for leaking protected or confidential information. Don't criticize government positions or policies publicly. So as I mentioned, we serve the government of the day. We are not there to be a spokesperson for that. We personally agree with those policies or not, but we are paid to deliver on those policies, on those programs. What you must do is to respect the duties of political impartiality, as I mentioned, serving that government of the day. I have been under a few governments in my 15 years in the government. And no matter when the government changed, it didn't change the way that I work, because whether or not I voted for the party in power or not does not have anything to do with how I govern myself as a professional in the government. Make sure you're differentiating between those personal opinions, the official government positions. So you can be very passionate about a cause. You also need to make sure that that doesn't conflict with your role in the government of Canada. We have seen examples of that over the past few months, over the past 6 months. So we need to be conscious of that, differentiating between your personal opinions and official government positions. Be mindful of how those opinions might be perceived in a professional context or publicly. So if you're working for Global Affairs Canada and you don't agree with the position that the government of Canada is taking on a particular file or a particular conflict, then that is something that you can absolutely have a personal opinion about. It's also absolutely something you should not be posting about publicly while you are an employee of Global Affairs Canada. So remember that your job as a public servant is to serve the public. So that doesn't mean because your employer is the government of Canada that you lose your rights. Doesn't mean that you're not allowed to vote for whoever you want to vote for or believe whatever you want to believe. But you have to balance those positions with your official duties, especially in terms of social media. Like very, very quickly, we've seen folks end or sort of put a wrench in their careers by a single tweet or a single post on LinkedIn. So make sure that you're taking time to think. We used to say, think before you tweet, but now that we're past the tweet stage, think about what you're posting online and how it reflects on your role. Have those conversations with your manager as well. Like there's lots of policies governing how you act, but know the norms of your organization. If you're working in a security establishment, if you're working on top secret files, your organization might say, we really prefer that you not identify that or even identify that you work here on LinkedIn. So have those conversations. We can't cover off, the sort of 100+ organizations in the GC and exactly their approach in terms of social media. So have those conversations with your manager as you start your work term. Just make sure that you're on the right side of how you should be governing yourself as a public servant. And I will pass over to Bria.
Awesome. So we're going to go and do a quick little quiz, let's call it, just so that we could see what you've learned so far. So using the Zoom quiz function, you will see a series of questions on your screen that'll help you understand your rights and responsibilities in balancing your role of public servant and your use of social media. So I'm going to go through this, allow you all to answer the questions. I will read them, but we'll leave the questions up here for a few seconds. So question 1 says, do employees have the right to engage in political activities? The options are either yes or no. Question 2, is Robert works for ESDC, which stands for Employment Social Development Canada. Robert has a Facebook profile granting limited access to his Facebook friends. He would like to post a picture of himself with a nominated candidate of a provincial political party and state his support for the candidate. Is this okay? Yes or no? The third question is, employees must perform their public service duties in a politically impartial manner and be perceived as such at all times. True or false? And lastly, the PSC may require that an employee be on leave of absence without pay to update the Facebook page for a candidate in a provincial election. True or false? So I'll give you all a few seconds to go through these questions and select your answers, and then we'll go through the answers and why that's correct. Okay, I think we got more than 50% of participants who've answered the questions. So we'll kind of go through them, and I'll provide an example, the answers as we go. So for question number 1, which was, do employees have the right to engage in political activities? The correct answer is yes. But if you are engaging in political activities, there are certain conditions that apply. So you want to be mindful of when you are engaging in those political activities. As a student, I do recommend having these conversations with your manager. They are your first point of contact. They're there to support you and provide you with information, making sure you're aware of what the rules are so that you are maintaining that impartiality when you are performing work for the government of Canada. But yes, you can engage in political activities. Okay, so for question number 2, it was about Robert and Robert wanting to post a picture of himself with a nominated candidate. And a lot of you said no, but the correct answer is yes. So again, the limited exposure does not significantly impact the requirement to perform Robert's role in a politically impartial manner. So he can post that picture. But again, it's really a matter of thinking about what you're posting, how it can impact you professionally, and if it's worth you posting something like that to make sure you're making a decision that won't impact you in your career in the future. So that's why the answer is yes, but again, being mindful of what you're choosing to post on social media. For question number 3, the answer is true, and a lot of you did say true. So employees must perform their public service duties in a politically impartial manner. Josh mentioned this a few times, so I'm happy that retained and stayed with you. So we must do that because our job is to serve as public servants. So we need to maintain that impartiality. And for the last question, the answer is false, which again, most of you did answer false, and a leave without pay would not be required for non-candidacy activities. However, this right must be balanced with your responsibilities to maintain the political impartiality of the public service. So again, it's a matter of remaining impartial and ensuring that any activities you do take part in, any posts that you do on social media are a reflection of your professionalism so that you can make sure there's no detriment to your career in the future. All right, I will hand it back over to Josh.
Awesome. Okay. All right. So what does it mean for you? So employees don't need permission from the Public Service Commission. Public Service Commission is the organization that you likely applied through to get into the Federal Student Work Experience Program. And they govern a lot of how we do things in the public service. But you don't need permission from them to engage in non-candidacy political activities. For couple of elections, I helped put out sort of lawn signs for the mayoral elections in Toronto. I didn't need to ask the Public Service Commission. I could go do that activity. And I ensured that that was, balanced with my responsibility to maintain that political impartiality of the public service. In our case, that something like a municipal election is much more straightforward, and doesn't impact people who run for a party for a municipal election, but still doesn't impact in terms of something that we need permission to do. I will say, just expanding on this a little bit, if you are looking to run for office at any point in time, that as a public servant, you need permission to do that. And there are reasons for that, because they need to make an evaluation of whether you can, if you're successful, then you go off, you run, you become a member of parliament, or the mayor of Ottawa or Vancouver or Calgary or whatever it is that you're running for. But if you're not successful, they need to make sure that you can come back to your new role, and that won't have an impact on how you can do your job in the future. So we've seen examples of that where employees that we worked with were approved to go and run as a candidate in an election to become a member of parliament. They were approved in advance, and they were not successful in the election. They came back to their previous role. It had been evaluated by the Public Service Commission that there was not an issue in terms of the role that they were returning to. We've seen news stories about candidates where that wasn't the case, where they determined that their role was working so closely with the, let's say, the government of the day, or in an impartial way, that if they were a candidate running to become the member of parliament, that they would not be able to return to their position following the election. This probably is not going to be a big issue for any of you in the next couple of years, but it might be an issue for you down the line. So just, if that's something that a route that you take in the future, get a better understanding of those policies and how you can kind of ensure that you can return if you are unsuccessful after running the election. Okay. Social media and online activities do provide challenges for employees. So we need to ensure that we have an ability to perform our duties in that impartial manner, and that it's not impaired or perceived to be impaired by what we say in our statements online. There are a lot of examples of this, a lot of examples from a bit over 2 years ago, when there was the trucker convoy in Ottawa. There were public servants who supported that, but it was not a legal activity, and they were essentially supporting a very problematic position. We saw police officers who were suspended from duty. We saw public servants who came under scrutiny for their actions and how they were sharing information about this online. That's just a simple example, but it's something that the Public Service Commission is and Treasury Board are keen to ensure is not an issue on an ongoing basis, and something that gets resolved quickly. All right, so shifting gears a little bit, let's go to the next slide. So now, as we look at how do you create a good LinkedIn post? So LinkedIn, I would say, is my preferred network as well, and certainly since the changes at Twitter, now X, we've seen a lot of public servants shifting to use LinkedIn as their main sort of social media tool. So how do you create sort of an effective post on LinkedIn to build your career? So if you want to advertise yourself as a candidate, looking for a job in a specific area, how do you create that sort of enticing post? So I guess start off with some of the following things. So have sort of a hook. So whether that's sort of posting something for information to others, is it posting to generate a conversation? Is it sharing an accomplishment or a best practice? What is that sort of hook in your statement? Why are you posting? Is it sharing your thoughts? Is it sharing your experience? Is it sharing an accomplishment or something cool that you worked on, or whatever the case may be? What's that hook? is it a statement of your values? So does it align with the core values of the public service? Does it align with your core values as a professional? Use that proactive approach. So show, what you're pursuing. I see a ton of folks we do a lot of these sessions. So I see a ton of folks who get a new job or accomplish something. And, one of my best practices is to go on, and as soon as somebody has gotten a new job, no matter who they are, whether they're a deputy minister, whether they are newly starting a student position in the government of Canada, I will go on to their and comment and say, congratulations, good luck in your. That's partly because I'm running a community for young and new public servants and students, and it's a simple way that I can spend 10 seconds to give them a word of encouragement, whether or not I've met them in person or whether we just had some sort of interaction on sessions like this or in other ways. But it's a way to sort of engage with people. So to make sure that I'm not just kind of pushing information out there. What's the focus? So briefly, sort of showcase that your relevant skills, your experience for public service work. So if you're doing a general post and saying, hey, I'm graduating in April of 2025, I am looking for a role starting in May of 2025 in the following particular areas. Or I'm looking for something on at a particular level or in a particular department. If you have any thoughts or would like to share your advice or have a lead, let me. Be relatively clear in terms of what you are looking for, in terms of being sort of proactive in that approach. So what is it that you studied? How does it apply to a new role? What is your language profile? All that sort of stuff. Very important if you're looking for a job on LinkedIn. I deliver a session as well on the sort of do's and don'ts for our in-person learning day on a good way to sort of find a job, and we use Facebook groups now a lot in agencies. But I'll talk a little bit about that after we finish this. So use that connection and that opportunity to connect and learn. So encourage those connections, those invitations to learn more about opportunities. I tend to kind of curate the connections that I accept and the ones that I don't, based on whether somebody is trying to sell me something or not. So if somebody is in the government of Canada, no matter where they work, I will approve their connection on LinkedIn. If somebody is an external supplier and they have 20,000 connections and it's relatively clear that they're connecting with me so that they can try to sell me a service or a product, then I generally refuse those connections. But be sort of clear of who you're connecting with and why. Like as I mentioned, I follow Simon Sinek, but Simon Sinek is never messaging me to sell me something. So figure out, who you want to connect with. Is it somebody who's doing cool work that you want to follow? Is it, somebody who could be a potential employer for you in the future? Be clear on why you're connected. And it's often useful when you're sending a connection invite to just say, like, why is it that you're connecting with this person? Proofread, so, avoid those typos, avoid those spelling mistakes, and just present yourself in the best possible way. So we'll go to the next slide, please. So try it yourself. So, what's an interesting fact? Like, why should people be contacted? What's your type of job that you have sought? So, yeah, so, well, this doesn't really apply to me. My favorite readings are the Constitution. But, it's possible. Priyanka, is this you? Is that your favorite reading? Is the Constitution?
Pardon?
Is this your favorite reading? Is the Constitution?
Oh, no. I don't know.
Be clear on that. I think it's just an example. So be clear on
Yeah.
the type of job sought. So are you looking for a student position? Are you seeking an indeterminate position? And I would say also, like, expand on, like, what's the mechanism? I'm a bridgeable student. I, have X number of work terms in the GC. I'm seeking a bridging opportunity. Be clear on, like, what the mechanism is for hiring. What's the group and level sought or the field of study? So I seek an IT1 position, IT2 position, and make sure that you are qualified for that position. what's the highest level of education and program? So graduating with a Bachelor of Commerce, honors, law minor. What's the end date of your studies? And this can be anticipatory. Sometimes there are changes. You need an extra course, whatever that gets pushed back. I have an anticipated graduation date of December 2020. What's your experience in the government of Canada? 2 years of experience working in FSWAP, in operations, project management, compensation, IT. What's your linguistic profile? Always important. Do you have language levels assessed or not? If you have not had language levels assessed, but you speak both English and French, maybe put on there that language levels not tested, expecting to be a BBB intermediate level in French. What's your place of work? So National Capital Region or any other city or town in Canada. Any other information? Are you qualified in a pool or with any department or agency? Do you have any preference of where you are working? Qualified in IT1 and 2. So I will say, just before we go on to the next slide, that we talk a lot about Facebook groups in a workshop that we do for in-person learning days. And I think you can find all of these linked through our wiki page at the Federal Youth Network. They can be a useful tool as you're looking for another student position, as you're looking for a casual position or bridging opportunity. So make use of those Facebook groups. And if you are not yet signed up for any of our in-person learning days, we will go through a workshop on the do's and don'ts of that. But just briefly, I will say, stay future oriented to what you are looking for in the future, what experience that you're bringing, what education that you're bringing. Why are you the most excellent person? A hiring manager like me can go and bring to their team and have an incredible experience of bringing in a new and innovative and tech savvy and incredible public servant who will bring a lot to our team, who will bring a lot to any sort of team that they join across the GC. So anyways, some things to keep in mind. I see we have some questions. Emojis used in a post. It depends. Yeah, I think we see those on lots of the Facebook groups in terms of the use of emojis. And personally, I find it can break up the text and provide a bit of a visual. So I like it as a hiring manager. I don't like it if there's 45 emojis in a 200 word. Priyanka, what's your experience?
I was just going to say, I think it really depends on the audience, on who you're posting to. We use emojis. I use emojis. But if I'm probably doing a personal post, I'm trying to find a position, I might not use emojis just because I'm, reaching out to managers or even senior management. So just being mindful of your audience when you do choose to use emojis, but it's definitely not a rule that says you cannot use emojis ever. So yeah, that's my take on that.
Absolutely. And so in terms of finding the Facebook groups, I think Sister Justine from our team can put the link in there. But we keep a list of the GC Facebook groups. These are unofficial, so public servants run them as a side of desk sort of project. So on our team, we co-administer a number of Facebook groups, one of them being the GC mentorship Facebook group. But then there are ones for jobs and careers where people can post their profile, post what they're looking for in terms of future employment. And Justine has kindly put the link in the chat. So check those out and join ones that apply to what you're looking for. And that you are meeting the rules of that Facebook. Just be very cautious in terms of posting in job seeking groups that are there to have job seekers, as opposed to posting in groups where they are saying like the purpose of this group is not for you to find a job, but maybe in the case of the mentorship group for you to get advice and guidance in terms of. Okay, with that, I will hand back to Priyanka.
Thank you so much. So we'll just summarize quickly what we learned today. I think we learned a lot. Like we've mentioned, Social media is a very, very powerful tool. It's used for networking and professional development. So making sure that you are using social media appropriately, professionally to help your career. It can be a great advantage to you as you kind of make your way through your career in the federal public service or anywhere really. Understanding the rules for using social media at work, specifically working in government jobs. We talked about being impartial, especially in political activity on social media, making sure you're not posting confidential information. All those things are to be taken into consideration to ensure that professionalism remains. So all the tips and tricks we provided to you today, make sure you remind yourself when posting on social media. If you are hesitant to post something, you should probably think twice before posting it, because it can be a reflection professionally. So you want to just be sure you're thinking things through before you post something. We talk about the balancing your political activities with your duties as a public service worker. So making sure you're aware of the rules, making sure you are not posting something that could be detrimental to you and your career, and how to write social media posts. So we provided a few tips and tricks on how to use a LinkedIn a little bit, and also the types of information you could use in a post that you do make. So the current position that you're in. So if you're a student, what you're seeking. Are you seeking part-time work, another student contract, or indeterminate employment? Those are all ways to kind of be approachable on social media in a professional way. So I think we've learned a lot today, and we can take a lot from this to make sure that we're using social media effectively. We really appreciate all of you taking the time to attend today's session. I do see some questions in the chat. A few of the questions are about pools, and I want to highlight that GC Students does a session called Plan Your Career. It's at the end of the summer term, and we do go through the technicalities of what a pool is, what an inventory is. So right now it is the beginning of your session. We want you to start off on the right foot, take all the information you learned from today's and yesterday's sessions, and get started with having those conversations with your managers, using these tools effectively to really get started. And at the end of the term, we'll talk about more of those technical pieces. But we've definitely taken those questions into consideration, and we have platforms where we can address these questions as we go on throughout the term. So don't hesitate to reach out to us if there are any conversations you want to have. Our social media handles are on the page there. And so please do follow us on all the social media. We have wiki pages for the Federal Youth Network as well as GC Students. So having that information in your back pocket while you are going through your student term can be extremely beneficial. And next week, we have Finn's in-person learning day in the National Capital Region. So if you're located in the National Capital Region, it's a great place to have that in-person learning and experience and networking. We also, the Federal Youth Network does these in-person learning days across Canada. So just keep an eye out for anything that might be coming to you in your region. A great way to kind of get started, especially this summer. So thank you all for your time. Thank you, Josh, for presenting with me, and I hope all of you have a great rest of your day.